Good morning, it's Dr. Alan Yim. In this video, I'm going to be showing you a little bit more about moving from one root position triad to the next when the bass moves by a second. This time, there is going to be an exception. We're going to break one of the guidelines here. So, if you remember, last time I was talking about this method and we said all the voices move in similar motion contrary to the bass to the nearest chord tone. This works except for one progression. So I have it written down here, except for 5/6. This is what we call the deceptive cadence. So I'm just going to write deceptive here because when we see a 5 chord, we usually expect to hear something like this. Okay, especially if it has the 7th. Okay, if it doesn't go to 1, one of the chords the 5 chord can go to is 6. That's what it sounds like when you're in major. If you're in minor, it's going to go to more like this. Okay. What happens when we have this chord progression? Well, let's take a look at it. I'll write this in minor so you can see a little bit more about it. Let's take this in the key of, how about D minor? Okay. So one of the things about the 5 chord in minor is, remember, we have to raise the leading tone, and I put a little arrow like that. That's my abbreviation for it. And I'm going to write the analysis. The 5 chord is A in the key of D, and the 6 chord is B flat. Okay, so we expect to hear a minor chord, right? We expect to hear 1, D minor, but instead deceptive cadences are very easy to recognize. I'm going to rewrite this down here a little bit better. 6 is going to be major since we're in minor key. You can recognize the deceptive cadence because instead of going to 1 in the mode that you expect, it goes to 6, which is in the opposite mode. So in D minor, we expect to hear a minor D minor chord. Instead, we hear a B flat major chord. Let's take a look at what happens. So again, the bass is going to step up. So here, remember, we have to raise up the leading tone. If we don't do that, we're not going to have a major chord. Okay? So we need to raise up the C sharp. That note, especially because it's in the soprano, needs to go to a particular other note. Because this is 7, we need to go to 1. And I'll highlight this in red. So this is not what we expect. It is going in similar motion to the bass, but we have to resolve the leading tone, especially because it's in the melody. Let's resolve the other voices how we normally would in this type of motion, which is all voices move contrary to the bass to the nearest chord tone. So the tenor is going to go down to F. The alto is going to go down to D. Now here's where you may have gotten a little foreshadowing if you're reading. Double the third. Here we have the third, and the 5th. Okay, and the root. So you notice the doubling is not what we expect. We have root, 2/3, and then a 5th. Now how does this affect everything? Well, what it means is that in the 2nd chord, you can't use the types of voice leading that we've been talking about, because in the 2nd chord, this one, the doubling is an exception. Okay, but we have to do it, especially if the leading tone is in the soprano. And that's the one thing you have to be careful about when using this type of motion. If you have a 5 chord to the 6 chord, There are some ways to get around this by putting the leading tone inside the chord, for example. But in minor, if that leading tone is in the soprano, and in major, if it's in the soprano, you have no choice. If you're in minor in general, you really don't have a choice, because if I went the other direction, I would have an augmented second, and you don't want to have that. So it sounds like this. Okay? Thanks for watching.